So, for those of you who have joined us for this evening, thank you very much. Tonight we'll be discussing spring pond dynamics in koi ponds with titled of Hack Your Koi Pond, the Spring Edition. So, for those of you who do not know me, I am Dr. Jessie Sanders. I am the Chief Veterinarian of Aquatic Veterinary Services of Northern California. I received my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Tufts University in Massachusetts and also hold a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology from the University of Rhode Island. I am a certified aquatic veterinarian and a member of the American Association of Fish Veterinarians. I have owned and operated our Aquatic Veterinary Services mobile business since March in 2013. We are currently serving over 200 customers along 300 miles of California coast and are actually looking to expand into a couple different states at this time. We just opened our hospital facility here in SoCal this January, and we are holding this webinar tonight in order to have pond owners be able to recognize problems early on and give them the tools to tackle stressful pond issues before they become too big of a problem. So the topics we are going to cover today are weather changes and what this means for your koi, water quality conundrums, algae of all kinds, system maintenance, nutritional considerations, and end with koi disease and treatment. Now, before we get going, for those of you who are pond owners, I have a little poll for you that will hopefully show up on the side, basically asking if you know what to expect this spring in your pond. I'm trying to get a gauge on how much pond owners are ready for. So if you have the time and can see that, please put in your answer there so we can see how much of this you might already know. All right, well, we have one expert, one newbie, and one person who's just here for the fun of it. So let's start with weather changes. So keep in mind that at first, fish are ectotherms. This means that they cannot regulate their internal body temperature. Unlike us, who are mammals, we are endotherms and can maintain a lovely 98.6 degree temperature pretty much all the time, no matter what is happening around us. Therefore, with fish, their internal body temperature is the same as the surrounding water temperature. Koi are poikilotherms, which mean that their body temp varies widely. So in a pond that travels between 60 and 80 degrees, this is classified as a wide temperature range. Coming into the spring, you always have warmer pond temperatures due to increased ambient temperature and longer days. However, especially this year, I'm sure some of your fish might have been a little confused. We had a warm snap at the beginning of April, and now it has cooled off a little, so your fish might have started exhibiting some of the behaviors and diseases that we will be going through today. With this warmer pond temperature and increased body temperature comes an increased metabolism, which can relate to increased activity. So what happens when metabolism increases? This leads to increased digestion, and we will go over nutrition later, increased reproduction or spawning activity, increased activity, fish swimming around more in the pond, they're out of their winter semi-hibernation in this area, increased disease potential, and increased immune response. However, the increased immune response is actually delayed behind the increased disease potential, and we will be covering that a little bit later. So, small organisms such as bacteria, virus, and parasites, think tiny one-cellular organisms, replicate rapidly. Compare that to the immune system of a fish, and it will take 2 to 3 weeks for them to counter this attack, which unfortunately leaves fish open to attacks by bacteria, viruses, and parasites in early spring, such as now the weather patterns that we are having. So, what can fish owners do? And we will be covering this today. Maintain good water quality and system maintenance, feed appropriately, monitor closely for signs of disease, and if you do see disease, treat appropriately and get help if you need it. There are many resources for pond owners these days that are ready with the drop of a hat in order to help you take care of your fish. So we'll be covering some of this delayed immune response today, since we have already seen a few ponds this year in our service that have had major issues with bacterial blooms and parasite outbreaks. So please keep in mind that coming into the spring, all bets are off. Whatever happened last year may not necessarily happen this year. So we're going to start with my favorite topic to talk about, water quality and the conundrums it leads to. So water quality is the #1 factor in fish health. Please compare it to you swimming around your own toilet bowl and breathing it in. Yes, not very pleasant for any of us. Hopefully you at least clean your toilets quite frequently. Adequate filtration needs to be maintained, no matter what the season, no matter what is going on in your pond. During the spring, you will most likely need to increase the amount and frequency of water changes due to the increased biologic products in your pond from high digestion and high metabolism. We'll be talking about that nitrogen cycle in just a few minutes. Big cleaning. So this is when you need to get into your system and clean it out thoroughly. We will be covering this in system maintenance, but keep it in mind that this is the time of year to get everything cleaned up before you start hitting some speed bumps in the summer. So if you don't know what's in your water, you better test it. And that's not just the pH of your water. You need to know pH, ammonia, nitrite, alkalinity, and temperature. There are test kits available. We offer free water testing here. And then I know all those people, oh, my water's clear. I know it's fine. So I propose this to you. Here is a beaker. It looks clear. But can you please tell me if that is water or acid? I guarantee that one will kill your fish pretty much instantly, and the other is safe for them. So clear water is not necessarily good water. So starting off with our nitrogen cycle, we have our fish here excreting ammonia from his tasty protein-based diet. That is converted into nitrite and then nitrate by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The nitrate is taken up by aquatic plants or algae and is also removed from your pond through water changes. So looking a little bit more into this, if say you were to have increased ammonia in your system, either you don't have enough bacteria in order to convert or your system is new, you might see signs of lethargy, anorexia, ulcers, or sudden death. So pretty benign signs that you wouldn't know about unless you test your water. You can see the same exact symptoms with excess nitrate. So that more benign part of your system, if it gets to be too high, you will have the same problems as if your pond was full of ammonia. And then the signs of nitrite toxicity. This is the second step in the cycle. Causes a syndrome known as brown blood disease, also more commonly known as methemoglobinemia. Basically, the hemoglobin in the blood is unable to bind to oxygen and the fish asphyxiate. So always make sure to test that part of your biologic cycle to make sure everything is working correctly. On to pH and alkalinity. As far as pH goes, stability is key. All those people who say your pond has to be at 7 is a complete myth. Most of the ponds I see in our area are between 8 and 8.5, and this is completely safe for koi. It is highly dependent on the source water you are putting in. So if you've been trying to get your pH down to 7, please stop torturing your fish and just let them be stable in the 8s. Alkalinity measures the buffering capacity of your water. Usually over 100, you will have a stable pH, unless there's some other event that happens that uses up all your buffering. In ponds that have gone a very long time with no cleaning, in a syndrome known as old pond syndrome, where they have used up all their buffers and their pH starts to tank downwards, This can be a very serious disease, so make sure you know that your alkalinity is high enough to keep your pH from swinging. Especially important in areas getting rain that is known to be more acidic than normal. Signs of unstable pH, sudden death. Unfortunately, sudden death is going to be a pretty common complaint for most problems people see with koi ponds. Dissolved oxygen. So oxygen is added to the water via a waterfall or air stones. There is increased demand for oxygen demand in warmer water temperatures because the fish are more active, they need to breathe more. Cold water stores oxygen much better than warmer water, just due to the molecular components of it. So keep in mind, summer's coming up, fish are going to need more oxygen. Algae also competes for the oxygen, so if you have lots of algae, you may not have enough oxygen for your fish. Make sure you don't have any dead zones in your pond. This is basically, say your pond is an amoeba shape and there's one little curve of it that's not getting any algae flow, water flow. This can actually end in an area where there's no oxygen, and if the fish swims in there, it could suffocate and die just from being in this one part of the pond that doesn't have oxygen. So, signs of oxygen depletion, lethargy, and again, sudden death. Heavy metals. So this includes copper. So any new construction products that have copper in them, now that they're in place, all that rain that we're starting to have can leach copper into systems, and this can cause very vague signs of lethargy, anorexia, ulcers, and sudden death. We do offer copper testing. There are copper dip strips available that will test even very, very low levels. So if you've used any copper near your pond or know there are copper pipes, you may need to install a special system in order to remove it to make it safe for your fish. Any other heavy metals of lead, manganese, mercury, other contaminants, you really need to test your water source once a year because these are not safe for people, let alone fish. So if you aren't on city water, you have a well, or you have a really old well that's just recently been opened, we really suggest you test everything to make sure it's both safe for you and your fish. Now on to chlorine. So chlorine is used to treat most city water systems. If it's bound with ammonia, it becomes chloramine, which is being used more and more frequently since it is much more stable chemical compound. Unfortunately, this adds both chlorine and ammonia to your system, both of which are problematic for koi. Make sure to test your source water to see which of the compounds you have in there. Basically, you can take your ammonia test kit to the source, and if it's chloramine, there will be ammonia present. And test for chlorine, even if your system isn't treated every day, if it's being treated once a week, you need to know that day of the week that it is being treated and has very high levels of chlorine. Low levels of 0.4 milligrams per liter can kill fish, but it can take up to 20 days being in those low levels. And we've had ponds this year, never had a problem before, but unfortunately, if chlorine is present, it's pretty much going to kill the fish eventually. High levels, so instead of 0.4, say you have 0.8, can kill in less than 8 hours. So make sure you know what is in your water. And then we'll talk about some aeration or additives that you can use to remove this from your source water and make it safe for fish in the maintenance section. With warmer water temperatures, you have increased fish excretion, so this leads to increased nitrogen products. No water changes or adequate filtration, you're going to have increased algae growth. Along with fish activity, increased carbon dioxide in the water will decrease your pH unless you have adequate buffering. This is the same for any acidic rain that you might have fall into your system. Increased reproduction from that metabolism can lead to spawning. Fish will be acting weird, as our clients put it, basically very slowly swimming, inappetent, and the water will be very foamy. Sometimes it's very hard to see the eggs in a system, so you want to make sure that with that foam, you perform a water change immediately to get all those gross protein products out of there. They will clog your biological filters very quickly and make it a pain to clean later. So here's just a quick key for you about the range of parameters you want to be looking for. As far as ammonia goes, 0.1 or less. So 0.1 or 0 is really where you want to be. The API kits that are most available to commercial pond owners, those all go from 0 to 0.25. So if it's anything less than 0.25, it will read 0. So if your pond's at 0.2, starting to creep up, that might give you a false reading of a 0 when your pond's actually starting to creep up. Nitrite, 0, all the time, no matter what. Nitrate, it really depends on the pond. You need to test it and see where your levels are and how they change after your water changes. pH, koi can tolerate anywhere between 6.5 to 9. Stability is key, and that is from your alkalinity, which needs to be over 100 milligrams per liter. And then temperature, it varies with every single pond. So next we will be talking about algae of all kinds. So with increased water temperatures, you're most likely going to get algae. This is from increased ammonia excretion, leading to increased nitrite, and then nitrate. This is leading to the increased algae growth. Nitrate is the main food source for algae and pond plants. Basically, it is algae fertilizer. So these are the two types of algae we see most frequently. String algae, which grows as long chains on the side of a pond, and cellular algae, which grows in suspension and basically makes the water look like pea soup. As long as your water quality is good and you have enough oxygen in there, your fish are fine to swim around in the pea soup algae. Some people think it brings out their colors more, but most people are just annoyed that they cannot see their fish, so removal of it is never a bad idea. String algae, best way to get it is to remove it with your hands or a brush. If you don't want to get it in there yourself, I suggest you pay the neighbor kid 20 bucks and have him pull it all out. Make sure you dispose of it properly. Do not let it rot in the sun. We have had instances of cyanobacteria being mixed in there, which is another type of algae, and it is deadly to other animals. Any dogs that eat it, cats, other varmints that live in your neighborhood, they can die from eating this, so make sure you dispose of it properly. Some chemical treatments can help. Mostly with the string algae, it needs direct contact for the best results. With cellular algae, a UV light is going to be your best removal method. It's the least harmful to fish. They're never going to go near it. You just need to keep in mind that you need to replace the bulb once a year for best results. And then chemical additives, we have the Algae Fix there. It's very commonly used. Make sure you know your pond size. The main problem with Algae Fix is people treat too much water for what they have. So if you have a 2,000 gallon pond, make sure you treat for 2,000 gallons, not 4. This will cause many problems from Algae Fix overdoses. And there are some fish that are more sensitive to these chemicals. So if your fish are acting a little weird after the first treatment, you definitely want to give them some time before putting in another dose, or give them a nice big water change and make sure that the first round of the chemicals is taken out of the system before you pour more in. So now that you've treated the algae, you may find that the water turns from green to gray and brown, which is from all those dead algae cells floating around. These are very tiny particles, and you will need a very fine filter in order to remove them quickly, like one of these sieve filters here on the right. If you don't have one of these, it can take almost 6 to 8 weeks to be fully clear. And again, now that you've killed all the algae and you really want to see your fish again, you need to get that water clean. It's just going to clog your filters. Again, keep in mind that since these little tiny plants have taken up the nitrate, when they die, they're going to release the ammonia back into your pond. So make sure your filtration is adequate once you treat, and keep in mind that fish can die from a massive algae die-off. Again, we talked about oxygen and algae competing with it from the fish. You need to make sure that in ponds that do have a lot of algae growth, and either it's okay with you, you're okay not treating it, it's okay for the fish, make sure that your levels are high enough in order for fish to be cohabitating in that pond. Again, the signs of less depleted oxygen are lethargy and sudden death. So again, oxygen is one of those harder chemical parameters to test, but we do offer it. We can get you test kits if it's that important to you. So here are the key points to take from this section. So if you do have an algae problem, best problem for the string, as much as you probably don't want to hear it, is a manual and brush removal. Cellular, UV light. If you must use a chemical method, follow the instructions closely. Know the size of your pond and monitor your fish closely for the first couple hours following treatment. Maintain water quality throughout treatments and consider improvements to your system if algae is a recurring problem. Maybe your filter just can't keep up with the amount of algae that's coming through, the amount of nitrate. Think about increasing your water changes and see if that does anything to your algae. On to system maintenance. So changing from winter into the summer, your pond's going to go through a bunch of changes. So we want to make sure that we're on top of that with our filtration, routine cleaning, water changes, deep cleaning, and of course leaks. So as far as filtration goes, your mechanical filter removes as large particles from the water, also known as a settling tank. Your biologic filter harbors good bacteria that is part of our nitrogen cycle to break ammonia into nitrite and nitrate. So the pump that you have in your pond should turn over the water in 1 hour minimum. So if you have a 200-gallon pond, your pump should be able to pump at least 200 gallons per hour. More is always better. So if we look at the box over here on our right, most pumps come with this little chart here. Basically, you find the size of your pond and then the head height, which is basically the equivalent of the distance between the surface of the water vertically to the top of your waterfall. And keep in mind that every 10 feet of horizontal push that your pump has to do equals an extra foot of head height. So keep that in mind and make sure you buy an adequate pump. When in doubt, go big. It will never do you wrong. So as far as how often to clean these systems, settling tanks need to be cleaned every 1 to 3 weeks in the summer. With these settling tanks, you can actually see how much debris has accumulated. The actual frequency will depend on the size of your pond versus the size of your filtration and how many fish or the bioload you have in that pond, how much you're feeding them, how much algae is in your system. There's a lot of things that can change how much you have to change your filter over. Biological filtration can mean rocks, bioballs, mats, nets, strapping, etc. Make sure you don't clean these things too thoroughly. You want to keep some of that good bacteria on there so it continues to convert all those nitrogen products into safe compounds. Really, a simple shake is all you need. Same 1 to 3 week cleaning cycle, and again, same as the mechanical filter. It depends on the size of your pond versus filtration, bioload, and a host of other components. So an example here at the shop, if you've come by and seen our 600-gallon pond, we have a settling tank and a biofilter. We do the settling tank about once a week. We take that down and clean it out. And then the biofilter we do every other week. However, our bioload for that pond is very large. We keep a lot of very small fish in there. So a pond of that size with much fewer fish will not need to clean as frequently. How often to clean your system? Watch your nitrate. If your nitrate starts to go up, if your waterfall stops flowing, if your water gets dark and cloudy, or you just don't see your pumps pushing as much out, it's time to clean your filters. So routine cleaning. This is cleaning you should be doing no matter what the season, no matter what is going on with your fish. Skim the leaves off and other debris, daily if you can. Mechanical filter, vacuum out the accumulated debris. Shake out your biologic filter. If you have a pressurized filter, backwash once a week per the manufacturer. This is pretty consistent for any type of pressurized filter. You want to make sure that all those beads, pills, anything like that is thoroughly broken up and has all the flow that it needs in order to act effectively. Clean out your skimmer basket and do routine water changes, which is physically removing the water from the system. It is not the same as topping off your system from evaporation. Basically, when water evaporates from a pond, it increases the concentration of all the products in the water. So it's not doing you any good. You need to make sure that you're physically taking water out of the old system and putting in new fresh water. If you backwash your filter, this is the same thing. It's pumping water out, so you just got to fill up your system. Unfortunately, leaks will do the same thing for you, but it's still not a good problem to have. So, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about and have never done water changes, it's time to start. Start by testing your water and get a baseline to see where your water's at. Keep in mind that water changes remove nitrate primarily as far as that nitrogen cycle goes. Again, nitrate is that big algae fertilizer. Start with about 25 to 30% every 2 weeks and watch your levels. See what happens, see where they taper off, and then push it out a week and see what happens. If that's all going smooth, all the levels are happy, push it out another week. See where it happens. So as long as your levels are stable, whatever system you come up with will work. So back to what's in your water. So now we're talking about chlorine and chloramine. So chlorine is used to purify drinking water for most city systems. It is highly toxic to koi. Low levels as 0.4 parts per million can kill your fish up to 20 days later, and double that can kill your fish in 8 hours. So if it's in your system, it needs to be treated. And then chlorine is a more stable compound, but it adds both chlorine and ammonia, both of which are problematic for koi. You must treat water with chlorine. I guarantee you, if you do not, your fish will die. Chlorine, straight chlorine, not chloramine. You can either use a chemical additive or you can aerate it for 24 hours in a separate container isolated from your fish and then put it in. Chlorine is not as stable as its chloramine cousin and can bubble off in 24 hours. However, with chloramine, you will need to use a chemical additive. You can bubble it all you want, but it's going to take up to a week. You may want to use a chemical additive with an ammonia binder. It will not remove it from the pond forever. Eventually it will break down and be re-released, so you want to make sure that your system is able to handle that ammonia further down the line. It will take care of the problem initially, but will not guarantee it from happening later down the line. So whatever product you decide to use, make sure you know what it treats. All water conditioners do not treat chloramine. If you're confused, it doesn't say on the bottle, I recommend you call the company and ask. We are happy to look into products for you. I want to make sure that your fish are safe. So now into deep cleaning. So this is cleaning that you do going into the summer and into the winter. You want to do it prior to the high metabolic activity in the summer and then their semi-hibernation in the winter. You want to cull plants. Cut them back. Make sure that water can get around them and breathe through them. Some plants are notorious for kind of making little islands wherever they go, so you really want to get in there and hack them back if you can. Vacuum the bottom of your pond and the substrate. If you have not done this in a few years and you know there's at least an inch of dead material on the bottom, you need to get your fish out of there before you start mucking around in the mud. If you have lots of mud, sorry, that should say mud, this could lead to anaerobic bacteria growth, which produce methane, and if that gets into the pond, you're going to have dead fish within 24 hours. If you do have rocks or pebbles on the bottom of your pond, I please ask that you get rid of them. They're not doing you any favors, and they're actually holding on to more debris than you really need in there. I know they may look pretty, but unless you're getting in there to stir them up with your routine cleaning, they gotta go. Make sure to keep all your equipment up to date. Anything that's starting to go, pumps, biofiltration media, skimmers, replace them when it's time. They're not built forever. These products are made to be a certain life and then they'll need to give out. So make sure when you're doing these deep cleanings that you check all your equipment to make sure that it's running properly. Always recommend that if you're a little hesitant about getting in there to clean it out, consider hiring a professional service. There are many professional services available that will get in there and do all the cleaning for you and take care of your fish. We can recommend some for you if you're hesitant, and we know that they will take good care of your fish. Leaks. If you have one, fix it now. Fix it this weekend. Professional help's always great. They are used to dealing with these sorts of problems. You can always wait and see where the water level drains to. However, if the leak is on the bottom of your pond, you're going to need to get all those fish out of there before the water reaches that level. So hopefully, if the pond stops leaking and there's still water in the bottom, you can apply a crack sealant and then fill it back up, and hopefully you will have gotten the leak. Make sure if you're putting in new water features to line all your waterfalls with pond liners. Waterfalls are where most ponds have their leak problems. Here in California, we're still in a drought, so water conservation is a must. I know it's hard with all the water changes and other stuff I'm telling you to do, but if you have a leak, you're not doing yourself any favors. Fix it now. Fix it this weekend. Get it taken care of so you don't have it hanging over your head in the summer. On to nutritional considerations. We will cover what do I feed my koi, how much do I feed my koi, when do I feed my koi, and what treats can I give my koi. Treats are always fun. So, what do I feed my koi? This depends on the water temperature, not the air temperature. If you don't have a thermometer, buy one now. Below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, do not feed anything. Their metabolism is not high enough to digest anything. I guarantee if you feed them and it's too cold, it's going to come out the other end looking exactly the same as when it went in. If it gets stuck in there, it can rot and produce gas, which will not be good for any fish, and they can die from having basically rotting in their abdomen. Between 55 and 65 degrees, you want to feed an easily digestible food. For Morse koi, this is a wheat germ-based diet. Your pond needs to be this warm for about 5 hours minimum in order to get their digestions going appropriately. Above 65 degrees, they can have whatever you want to give them. If you're going for the growth, you can give them the all-season higher protein food. Fish can have the wheat germ diet all year round. It is perfectly safe for them and fully nutritious in order for them to eat it during the warm weather. It's what we feed our fish here year-round, because we don't have unlimited space, unfortunately, and these guys need to kind of stay on the tiny end. So our fish get wheat germ. It is fine if all of yours get wheat germ as well. How much do I feed my koi? We recommend, if you're unsure with how much you're feeding them, start with the 5-minute method. So basically, you'll sprinkle a tiny bit of food into the pond. If you have a feeding ring, basically a floating ring that the fish knows is the equivalent of a dinner bell, it will keep your food from floating away if you're using a floating pellet. Wait for them to eat it all. Every single pellet has to be gone. And then sprinkle a bit more and repeat. Let them eat it, sprinkle a bit more, go for 5 minutes, and stop. Most ponds that I've seen try this, the fish will actually stop before the 5 minutes are up. This method has been developed in order to prevent excess food from ending up in your filtration. This can add problems onto your water quality by having more ammonia in your pond as that food degrades. When do I feed my koi? So when during the day? Ponds without a lot of direct sunlight. Best to feed your koi around midday, noon or 1. This is when your pond is going to be the warmest. For ponds with a lot of direct sunlight, usually it's best to feed them in the morning or evening. The pond is nice and warm, but not too warm. Please keep in mind this is temperature dependent. Check your thermometer at least a few times a day until you're able to answer when does your pond reach its peak and how high does the peak go. So those ponds with a lot of direct sunlight may reach the mid to high 80s, and fish just aren't going to be interested in eating sometimes at those temperatures. It's a lot of stress for them to be up at that high a temperature. So check your temperature, get a thermometer, you'll be all set. And then what treats can I give my koi? So just like any other pet, koi can certainly get treats. We recommend the low-calorie options. Fruit, watermelon, or oranges are great. Veggies are also fun. Our fish here certainly love their watermelon. High calorie, also known as fish candy. These are those freeze-dried krill that are readily available. For as far as the fruits and veggies goes, they can eat as much as they want. It's not going to really do much to them. It's always a nice supplement to get some more vitamin C and fiber in them. The krill treats we ask that you save for picky eaters, fish that are sick, and maybe at the holidays. So save those for the special times or fish that really need some extra nutrition because they're struggling in other areas. Now on to the fun part, koi, disease, and treatment. So starting with the parasites, this is what I see most frequently. Parasites most likely grow on more rapidly than the fish's immune system, especially at the beginning of this year. They like to live on the skin and the gills. Flukes are guys up there in the top right corner, also known as monogenean trematodes. Usually these are on all fish at low levels all the time. If there is stress or illness, these guys can start to replicate very quickly and start to cause lots of problems. Trichodina, on the bottom right there, is the same behavior as flukes. These guys live on the skin. The dactylogyrids live in the gills. The gyrodactylids live in the gills and cause lots of itchy skin. And then the big one of these is ick, also known as white spot disease. We'll be looking a little bit more at their life cycle on the next page. This has an encysted stage of its life cycle in the pond away from the host fish. You will need to treat at least 3 times in succession in order to get all the life stages. Clinical signs, basically anything that's really itchy, they're going to try to scratch themselves, and in fish speak, since they have no nails or fingers, they do a behavior called flashing, where they use the sides and bottoms of the ponds to scratch themselves. Sometimes you'll see them exhibiting this behavior directly. Other times you will see them bruised from the flashing behavior. Basically this looks like pinker skin with slightly raised scales. So here's our ick life cycle. We'll start with our infected fish. You can see it has the white spots physically on him. The trophont stage is actually found in the gills. This will fall off and into the water and become an encysted tomont. So this is the stage of the life cycle where the only thing that's going to kill it is bleach. And I guarantee if you're treating for that with bleach, your fish will die first. One of those tomonts can produce over 1,000 thermonts. So even one of these little guys can cause quite a problem. With this, again, when you have to treat 3 times in succession, you want to make sure that you're getting all of these thermonts that are spawning. So first time you treat, you might still have some cysts that aren't affected. You have to wait till they all hatch in order to completely treat the system. As far as treatment goes for these guys, best for fish is the salt. It's not good for plants, and you need to cull or treat separately since those tomonts can live in their roots. So keep in mind that affected plants coming in can bring this with them. The next best but more expensive is praziquantel. There are pond treatments available. You will need to perform additional water changes when you're adding this medication. A vet-prescribed medication is also available. We make it in a medicated feed, so with the fish eating this directly, you don't need to do any additional water changes. However, it is more expensive. Cheap but still effective and readily available is formalin or malachite green based treatment. Please keep in mind malachite green is on its way out, so try, if you've used it in the past, try to look at some new sources in order to treat your parasites. If you are going to use salt, we recommend getting it up to 3 to 6 parts per thousand. Your duration of treatment for all of these is going to depend on your pond temperature. An increased pond temperature will result in a faster life cycle for this parasite. So ponds up in the 70s, you can treat every other day, 3 times, you'll be good. Colder ponds, depending on the temperature, will need longer standards of treatment. Bacterial infections are usually always secondary to something else. If it's water quality, parasites, overcrowding, or other stressors. It is very rare to find a primary bacteria infection. Excuse me. Clinical signs of bacterial infections include ulcerations, secondary fungus, lethargy, and sudden death. Treatment. In order to treat, you must first confirm a primary infection. This usually requires culture and sensitivity testing. You can do a wide spectrum water treatment, but if it doesn't work, you will need to reach for that culture and sensitivity testing to make sure that the next medication you use will be the correct one. Medicated feeds are available. I'm not talking about the commercially available ones because those don't put what medication concentrations are in them. I am happy to make medicated feeds for my clients here and recommend that you ask your veterinarian for the same. Injections are done by some professionals and veterinarians. Recommend that you, again, culture and sensitivity before you're reaching for the injectable medications. Always treat the secondary cause first, so make sure that everything across the board is acting correctly as far as water quality, nutrition, filtration. Make sure you check all those first before you're reaching for the medications. Viruses. There are some specific to koi. Papilloma-like viruses cause cauliflower-like warts. Usually these are found in the mouths of koi. They'll grow to a certain size and fall off. They might grow back and then fall off. So usually it's not too big a deal. Fish will have it. They'll get a few bumps and bruises, but other than that, it's not a big issue. Koi herpes virus 1, always known as carp pox, from our guy on the right here. It causes candle wax or blister-like lesions along the dorsal ridge. It is a benign epithelial hyperplasia, so basically their skin grows to excess. It does not affect their quality of life. It is very sad if you have a showfish that gets this, but other than that, it does not change their life any one bit. Koi herpes virus 3 is the one you need to look out for. This can cause sudden death in 24 to 48 hours. Carriers can persist, so ponds that have been isolated, they've had horrible die-offs in the past, yet these couple fish have lived. They could be carriers for koi herpes virus. So if you're in the mood to adopt some more fish, or you're looking to add fish from a pond that has questionable backgrounds, there is testing available through UC Davis. If you're not in our area, your local fish vet can take the samples and ship it to them. It's great, it's easy, and your fish will thank you when they don't die from herpes. And then fungus is usually almost always secondary to water quality issues. Some fish are more susceptible with those that have low immune function, say if they do have other herpes infection. But it's also secondary to inappropriate direct treatment. So if you have a treatment such as Melafix or Pimafix or Algae Fix, never ever put it directly on your fish. Basically their skin will die and slough off, and the fungus will come and grow as a big fuzzy fur coat. So anything that is meant as a water treatment should never be directly applied to fish. It is meant to be diluted within the system. So just going over a few things real quick before I take questions. Going back to the water changes, what happens when metabolism increases in koi? You have increased digestion, increased reproduction, increased activity, increased disease potential, and increased immune response. But remember, it is delayed. Parasites, bacteria, and other pathogens get a head start, no matter what. There's no way around it. Make sure that everything else in your system is working well, and it won't be a big issue for you. Number one thing for koi health, water quality. If your water isn't any good, I guarantee your fish will be sick. Test the water regularly. Do not rely on pH alone. Do not rely on the look of the water in order to quantify that this water is clean. Test it using a test kit. And the drip kits are always preferred to the strip kits, but the strip kits are better than nothing. Again, reviewing our parameters real quick. Make sure you know what these should be before testing your water. And remember, with the chlorine, chloramine, copper, lead, manganese, mercury, these all have to be 0 or else you're going to have a lot of problems with dead fish. Those specialty testings can usually be done by most commercial hardware stores. Some is offered through your town hall as well. It's best to inquire there about where to test their water. And if they give you like generalized, this is what the town water testing looks like, make sure you take a sample of your own source water because it can be very different from the generalized town readings. If you have an algae problem, you want to use the best method. String, get it out of there by hand. Cellular, use a UV light. If you must use a chemical method, make sure to follow the instructions closely. Know the size of your pond. If you don't know it and it's hard to calculate, then you can do a basic salt test to see how much salt dissolves in your pond, and then you take the concentration of it and you can figure out how big your pond is. Make sure to monitor fish closely when you're using these chemical methods to make sure that they're not going to have any adverse reactions. Make sure you always maintain your water quality and consider improvements to your pond if algae is a recurring problem. With routine cleaning, you want to skim off the leaves and other organic debris, vacuum out your mechanical filter, shake out your biological filter, backwash your pressurized filter once a week, clean out your skimmer basket, and physically remove water from your system using a water change. Deep cleaning, now's the time of year to get in there and clean it out. Hire your neighbor's kids, use your own kids, get your dog involved, have them help you clean it out thoroughly. If you have a leak, take care of it now, this weekend. Just bang it out and then you won't have to worry about it for the future. And if you need help, get it. There are plenty of professional services available that are happy to help you clean out your pond and get it all spiffed up for your fish in order to mitigate disease processes in the summer. As far as nutrition goes, know your water temperature and feed the correct diet. If you don't have a thermometer, get one now. Use that 5-minute feeding technique if you haven't found one that's worked for you. This will minimize wasted food and help with water quality problems. Feed during the correct time of day, and remember this is most likely direct sunlight dependent. Always watch your temperature, see where your spike is, and see how high your spike goes. Low-calorie snacks, such as fruit and vegetables, are fun additions. It gives your koi something to play with, which is always fun, and gives you a little bit of enjoyment as well to watch them enjoy those snacks. Disease and treatment. Please keep in mind that most disease in koi ponds is secondary to water quality or another stressor. Stressors can include predators coming around at night, loud noises going on if you have someone jackhammering in your neighborhood. It could be from overcrowding, inappropriate diet, feeding before the pond is warm enough. So make sure you treat correctly the first time. If it's a secondary problem, take care of that first before you attack the big sign, the ulcers, or whatever else is going on. Please don't just dump a bunch of treatment on it. We are here to help you in any way we can. You can email us, give us a call on the phone, set up an appointment. We have in-house appointments now. We can refer you to veterinarians in your neck of the woods that can help you. We just want to make sure that your fish are happy and healthy. And for those of you who are in your area, if you don't have what you need for the spring, we are actually having a big sale this weekend. So 10% off everything. Thermometers are 20% off, so you will know your temperature. We are also offering it online. You can use the code SPRING to receive 10% off all your online orders. And then the thermometer one is Thermo, T-H-E-R-M-O. So if you're not in our area, we're happy to do that. Also this weekend in our area, for those of you looking for more fish, there is going to be a sale at Champion Koi over the hill in San Jose. It is the best place to get exceptional quality koi in our area. We recommend Champion and Genki out of the two main distributors in our area. Keep in mind that you need to make sure you have enough room for a fish in your pond. They will grow, and the traditional anecdote of 1 inch per fish per gallon does not true whatsoever. Fish vary in girths and other biologic parameters, and make sure that if you are bringing a new fish in, that you have the capability of quarantining it. These guys are really good at quarantining fish when they arrive, so make sure you get its quarantine history. That's why we like them. If you have fish coming in from other ponds, make sure that they are either quarantined in a separate containment unit that is separate from all your other fish, or make sure that you can either bring it to a hospital facility such as ours, and we will watch it and make sure that there are no problems with it. And now we have time for a few questions. If you need to run, thank you very much for your time. My email is there, so if you have any questions you need to email me at a later time, I would be happy to do it. So one of our questions here is, can fish be fed more than once a day? Would you still use the 5-minute feeding rule if you fed more than once? So yes, if you're going to be feeding more than once a day, you can use the 5-minute feeding time each time. So feeding them in the morning, they get 5 minutes there. Feeding them 5 minutes in the evening, you can get them there as well. Let's see. Another question is, how would you recommend cleaning or removing the muck on the bottom of a flat bottom sealed concrete pond that does not have any pebbles or rocks? Any recommendations for pond vacuums? So yes, there are pond vacuums available. We will soon have one here in our shop that is available for rent. Pond Max makes a good one. Matala makes another one as well. It's a little more expensive, but we're certainly happy to work with people who are looking into vacuums. Again, we have that 10% sale coming up, so if you need to order it, we'll happily offer you the 10% on that as well. Anyone have any other questions before we finish up here? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you being part of our very first webinar. We hope to offer many more of these in the future. Please give us any feedback that you have. There will be a very short survey at the end if you don't mind taking a few minutes to follow up and take care of that. Other than that, please email me all other questions that you have, and I thank you very much for attending.